In the dusty haze of a Montana sunset, where the sky bled orange and purple over endless prairies, Elena stepped off the creaking stagecoach with a carpet bag clutched in her trembling hands. She was 25, with eyes like stormy seas and hair the color of midnight, but her spirit felt as worn as the faded dress she wore. Back in Boston, she'd answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride out of sheer desperation. Her family gone to the cholera outbreak, her dreams of a quiet life shattered. Now, facing the vast unknown, she whispered to herself, "What have I done?" The cowboy waiting for her was Jack Harlan, a man carved from the land itself. Broad-shouldered, sun-leathered, with a gaze that could pierce the horizon. Beside him stood a boy of 8, freckled and wide-eyed, clutching a wooden horse toy. Little Tommy Harlan, Jack's son, whose mother had been claimed by fever 3 years prior. Elena's heart twisted at the sight of them. This was no fairy tale. It was a gamble on strangers' mercy. Jack tipped his hat, his voice gruff but kind. "Miss Elena Vasquez? I'm Jack. This here's Tommy." The boy peeked from behind his father's leg, then broke into a shy smile that lit up his face like dawn breaking. Elena knelt to his level, her voice soft with the faint lilt of her immigrant roots. "Hello, Tommy. I've come a long way to meet you." But as they rode back to the ranch in the wagon, the weight of her doubts crashed over her. The land was unforgiving, the isolation profound. She wasn't a frontierswoman. She was a city girl who'd barely milked a cow in storybooks. That night, as stars blanketed the sky, Elena sat by the fire, watching Jack mend a fence post while Tommy played nearby. "Mr. Harlan," she said finally, her voice breaking the silence like a fragile glass. "You can send me back. I'm not what you expected. I don't know this life." Jack paused, his hammer mid-swing, and looked at her with those steady eyes. Tommy, overhearing, froze in his tracks. The boy's face crumpled, and he rushed to her side, wrapping his small arms around her waist. "No, ba. Don't send her away. She's nice like Mama was." Elena's breath caught. The child's plea was a dagger to her insecurities. Jack set down his tools and knelt beside them. "Tommy's right," he said quietly. "He already chose you the moment you smiled at him. But it's your choice too, Elena. Stay a spell. See if the land speaks to you." She nodded, tears stinging her eyes, not knowing then that this simple act of staying would unravel threads of fate she never imagined. The days blurred into a rhythm of chores and discoveries. Elena rose with the sun, learning to churn butter and tend the garden under Jack's patient guidance. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes, fixing her a stool to reach the high shelves, sharing stories of the ranch's history over coffee. Tommy, however, was her constant shadow. He showed her his secret fort by the creek, where he'd hidden treasures, shiny rocks, a bird's feather, and a locket that once belonged to his mother. "Mama used to sing to me," he confided one afternoon as they picked wildflowers. "Will you sing, Miss Elena?" Her voice, untrained but warm, filled the air with a lullaby from her childhood in Spain, passed down by her own mother. Tommy's eyes sparkled, and in that moment, Elena felt a flicker of belonging, like a seed taking root in foreign soil. Yet, the West was no gentle cradle. An unexpected turn came with the first storm, a ferocious gale that howled like a beast unleashed. Rain lashed the ranch, turning the ground to mud, and lightning cracked the sky. Jack was out rounding up the cattle when the creek swelled, threatening to flood the barn. Elena, heart pounding, bundled Tommy inside, but the boy slipped away in the chaos, desperate to save his pony from the rising waters. She found him knee-deep in the torrent, clinging to a branch as the current pulled at him. Without a thought, Elena plunged in, her dress heavy with water, grabbing his hand just as the branch snapped. They tumbled together, but she held fast, pulling him to the bank with strength she didn't know she possessed. Soaked and shivering, they huddled under a tarp until Jack returned. His face pale with fear turned to awe. "You saved him," he murmured, wrapping them both in blankets. That night, as Tommy slept soundly, Elena realized her worth wasn't in perfection, but in the fierce love that had bloomed unbidden. But deeper realizations awaited. As weeks turned to months, Elena uncovered layers of Jack's quiet sorrow. He wasn't just a cowboy. He was a widower haunted by loss, raising a son alone while battling debts from a bad harvest. One evening, poring over the ranch's ledger by lamplight, she noticed discrepancies, numbers that didn't add up, hints of a neighbor's sabotage, old rivalries from land disputes. "Jack," she said, her voice steady, "we can fight this. I've got a head for figures from my days clerking in Boston." Together, they pored over maps and records, her fresh eyes spotting a legal loophole that could save the ranch. It was an unexpected alliance, born of mutual respect, turning strangers into partners. The profound turn came during the town fair, a bustling event of rodeos and pie contests. Elena entered her first apple pie, nervous but determined. Tommy cheered her on, his pride evident. But whispers followed her, outsider, foreigner, mail-order misfit. When a jealous rival, the widow Clara from the neighboring spread, accused her of stealing recipes, Elena's cheeks burned. "Send her back where she came from," Clara sneered. Jack stepped forward, his voice booming over the crowd. "Elena ain't going nowhere. She's family." But it was Tommy who delivered the blow. Rushing to the stage, he declared, "She's my new mama, and she's the best." The crowd fell silent, then erupted in applause, moved by the child's unfiltered truth. In that moment, Elena realized the power of chosen bonds, how kindness could bridge divides wider than oceans. As autumn painted the leaves gold, tension built toward the climax. A fever swept the valley, reminiscent of the one that took Jack's wife. Tommy fell ill, his small body burning hot, delirious with dreams of his mother. Jack paced like a caged animal, fear etching lines on his face. Elena, drawing on memories of her own family's ordeal, refused to yield. She brewed herbal teas from wild roots she'd learned about, sat vigil through endless nights, sponging his brow and whispering stories of brave knights and faraway lands. Jack watched her, his stoicism cracking. "I can't lose him too," he confessed in the dim light. "Nor can I," she replied, her hand finding his. In a moment of raw vulnerability, he shared his deepest regret, not being enough for his first wife, burying his grief in work. Elena's compassion flowed like a river. "You're enough, Jack." And together, we're more. Her selflessness shone brightest when the doctor arrived too late due to washed-out roads. It was her tireless care that pulled Tommy through the crisis. Dawn broke on the day Tommy's fever finally shattered, his eyes clear and bright. "Miss Elena," he whispered, "don't ever leave." Jack, overcome, took her hand outside the cabin, the crisp air alive with possibility. "You can send me back," she echoed her earlier words, half joking through tears. He pulled her close, his voice a rumble of certainty. "My son already chose you, and so have I." Their embrace sealed a transformative act, not just of love, but of generosity in opening scarred hearts. In the years that followed, the Harlan Ranch flourished, a testament to united hands and spirits. Elena became not just a wife and mother, but a beacon in the community, teaching immigrant families English and sharing her knowledge. Tommy grew tall and kind, carrying the legacy of compassion. The story of a mail-order bride who stayed spread like wildfire, inspiring others to see beyond surfaces, to embrace the unexpected gifts of humanity. In a world often harsh and divided, their tale whispered a universal truth. Kindness isn't a weakness. It's the forge that shapes unbreakable bonds. It reminds us that selflessness can turn strangers into saviors, and that the power of choosing one another, flaws and all, lights the path to hope. For in the vast prairies of life, it's the hearts we open that truly make us home. In the dusty haze of a Montana sunset, where the sky bled orange and purple over endless prairies dotted with sagebrush and distant mountains, Elena stepped off the creaking stagecoach with a carpet bag clutched in her trembling hands. The journey from Boston had been grueling, days of rattling rails, dusty trails, and the constant churn of uncertainty in her stomach. She was 25, with eyes like stormy seas inherited from her Spanish grandmother, and hair the color of midnight that she tied back in a practical braid. But her spirit felt as worn as the faded calico dress she wore, patched at the elbows from years of mending. Back in the bustling streets of Boston, she'd answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride out of sheer desperation. Her family had been claimed by the cholera outbreak 2 years prior, leaving her alone in a tenement room, scraping by on seamstress work that barely paid the rent. Dreams of a quiet life with books and a garden had shattered like glass underfoot. Now, facing the vast, unforgiving unknown of the American West, she whispered to herself, "What have I done? This land will swallow me whole." The cowboy waiting for her was Jack Harlan, a man carved from the land itself. Broad-shouldered, with skin leathered by sun and wind, and a gaze that could pierce the horizon like an arrow. He stood tall in his worn boots and Stetson, exuding the quiet strength of someone who'd wrestled blizzards and droughts alike. Beside him stood a boy of 8, freckled and wide-eyed, clutching a wooden horse toy whittled from pine. Little Tommy Harlan, Jack's son, whose mother, Sarah, had been claimed by a relentless fever 3 years prior during a harsh winter. The loss had left a void in their lives, one Jack filled with relentless work on the ranch, and Tommy with imaginative play that often wandered into loneliness. Elena's heart twisted at the sight of them. This was no romantic fairy tale spun in dime novels. It was a gamble on strangers' mercy, a leap into a world where survival depended on grit and grace. Jack tipped his hat, revealing hair streaked with gray at the temples, his voice gruff but laced with a kindness that surprised her. "Miss Elena Vasquez? I'm Jack Harlan. This here's my boy, Tommy." The child peeked from behind his father's leg, his blue eyes, a mirror of Jack's, curious yet cautious. Then, as if deciding she was friend rather than foe, he broke into a shy smile that lit up his face like the first light of dawn breaking over the Rockies. Elena knelt to his level, ignoring the dust settling on her skirt, her voice soft with the faint lilt of her immigrant roots, a blend of Spanish inflection and New England clip. "Hello, Tommy. I've come a long way to meet you. Do you like horses? I read about them in books, but I've never ridden one." Tommy's grin widened, and he thrust the toy forward. "This is Thunder. Pa made him for me. You can hold him if you want." In that innocent exchange, Elena felt a spark, a tiny flame against the chill of her fears. They climbed into the wagon, the horses snorting as Jack flicked the reins. The ride to the ranch was silent at first, broken only by the creak of wheels and the distant call of a hawk. Tommy chattered eventually, pointing out landmarks, a twisted oak struck by lightning, a meadow where deer grazed. Jack glanced at Elena occasionally, his expression unreadable. "The ranch ain't much," he said finally, "but it's home. 100 acres, cattle, a few horses. Winters are hard, but summers make up for it." Elena nodded, her mind racing. She wasn't a frontierswoman raised on horseback. She was a city girl who'd learned to navigate crowded markets and factory whistles. The isolation hit her like a wave as they crested a hill, revealing the modest cabin with its stone chimney, a barn-weathered gray, and fences stretching into infinity. Doubt gnawed at her. How could she fit here? Cook over an open fire? Mend fences in blizzards? That night, as stars blanketed the sky in a dazzling display she'd never seen in smoggy Boston, Elena sat by the flickering fire in the cabin's main room. The air smelled of pine and stew. Jack had prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread. Tommy played nearby with his toys, enacting a dramatic battle between cowboys and bandits. Jack mended a fence post at the table, his hands calloused and steady. The weight of her doubts crashed over her like the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Mr. Harlan," she said finally, her voice breaking the silence like a fragile glass shattering on stone. "You can send me back. I'm not what you expected. I don't know this life, the cattle, the land. I'd only be a burden." Her words hung in the air, heavy with self-doubt, born from a lifetime of feeling out of place as an orphan immigrant in a land of opportunity that often felt closed to her. Jack paused, his hammer mid-swing, and looked at her with those steady, piercing eyes that seemed to see right through to her soul. Tommy, overhearing, froze in his tracks, his toy horse dropping to the floor with a clatter. The boy's face crumpled, eyes welling with tears that he tried to blink away like the tough little cowboy he aspired to be. He rushed to her side, wrapping his small arms around her waist in a hug that squeezed her heart. "No, ba. Don't send her away. She's nice like Mama was." She smiled at me, and she held thunder. Elena's breath caught. The child's plea was a dagger to her insecurities, twisting with the purity of his affection. She stroked his hair, fighting her own tears. Jack set down his tools with deliberate care and knelt beside them, his large frame somehow gentle. "Tommy's right," he said quietly, his voice like gravel under boots, but warmed by emotion. "He already chose you the moment you smiled at him back at the station. But it's your choice too, Elena. Stay a spell. See if the land speaks to you the way it does to us." She nodded, tears stinging her eyes, not knowing then that this simple act of staying would unravel threads of fate she never imagined, weaving her into the fabric of their lives. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of chores and small discoveries, each one a step towards something unfamiliar yet profound. Elena rose with the sun, its rays slanting through the cabin's small windows, painting the wooden floors golden. She learned to churn butter in the cool dawn, her arms aching at first, but growing stronger with each turn of the dasher. Jack was her patient teacher, demonstrating how to gather eggs from the henhouse without startling the birds, or how to weed the vegetable garden where carrots and potatoes pushed through the rich soil. He was a man of few words, his conversation sparse like the trees on the prairie, but his actions spoke volumes, fixing her a stool to reach the high shelves in the pantry, sharing stories of the ranch's history over steaming cups of coffee as the morning mist lifted. "My pa homesteaded this land," he'd say, "fought off wolves and claimed jumpers. It's in the blood." Tommy, however, was her constant shadow, a bundle of energy and curiosity that pulled her from her shell. He showed her his secret fort by the creek, a makeshift shelter of branches and old blankets where he'd hidden his treasures. Shiny quartz rocks that sparkled like diamonds, a blue jay's feather, and a silver locket that once belonged to his mother. "Mama used to wear this," he confided one afternoon as they picked wildflowers, daisies and lupins blooming in riotous color along the bank. The creek babbled softly, a soothing counterpoint to his solemn tone. She said it kept her heart safe. But then she got sick, and Pa says she's in heaven now. Elena's throat tightened. She knew loss too well, the ache of empty chairs at the table. "Your mama sounds wonderful," she replied, kneeling to help him arrange the flowers in a jar. "Will you sing to me like she did?" Tommy asked, his eyes hopeful. Her voice, untrained but warm, filled the air with a lullaby from her childhood in Spain, passed down by her own mother before the family fled to America. "Do her meet Nino, do her meet ya." Tommy's eyes sparkled, and he joined in with made-up words, their laughter echoing. In that moment, Elena felt a flicker of belonging, like a seed taking root in foreign soil, nourished by the boy's unreserved trust. Yet, the West was no gentle cradle. It tested souls with its raw power. An unexpected turn came with the first storm, a ferocious gale that rolled in from the north like a vengeful spirit. The sky darkened to an ominous gray, winds howling like a beast unleashed, bending trees and whipping dust into whirlwinds. Rain lashed the ranch in sheets, turning the parched ground to slick mud that sucked at boots and wagon wheels. Lightning cracked the sky, thunder rumbling deep in the earth. Jack was out rounding up the scattered cattle, his slicker flapping as he rode into the fray, leaving Elena to secure the cabin. She barred the shutters, lit lanterns against the gloom, and tried to keep Tommy calm with stories. But the boy, adventurous to a fault, slipped away in the chaos, desperate to save his pony from the rising waters in the barn. Elena noticed his absence when the wind rattled the door. Panic surged through her as she called his name into the tempest. There he was, knee-deep in the swollen creek, clinging to a precarious branch as the current tugged at his small frame, threatening to sweep him away. "Tommy!" she screamed, her voice lost in the roar. Without a thought for her own safety, Elena plunged in, her dress heavy with water, the cold shocking her to the bone. She grabbed his hand just as the branch snapped with a crack like gunfire. They tumbled together in the frothing water, but she held fast, her fingers locked around his wrist with a mother's instinct she didn't know she had. Using every ounce of strength, she pulled him to the bank, collapsing in the mud as rain pelted them. Tommy coughed and cried, burying his face in her shoulder. "I was scared," he whimpered. "Me too, little one," she whispered, rocking him. "But we're safe now." Jack returned hours later, his horse lathered and exhausted, his face pale with fear that turned to awe as he saw them huddled under a tarp by the barn. "You saved him," he murmured, wrapping them both in dry blankets from his saddlebag, his hands lingering on Elena's shoulder. That night, as Tommy slept soundly by the fire, his breathing even, Elena and Jack sat in quiet companionship. "I thought I'd lost everything again," Jack admitted, staring into the flames. "Sarah, she slipped away so fast. I couldn't save her." Elena reached for his hand, her touch tentative but sincere. "You can't save everyone, Jack, but you give them a fighting chance. That's kindness in its purest form." Her words hung between them, a bridge over the chasm of their pasts. As weeks turned to months, Elena uncovered layers of Jack's quiet sorrow, peeling back the stoic facade like onion skins. He wasn't just a cowboy scratching a living from the land. He was a widower haunted by what-ifs, raising a son alone while battling debts from a bad harvest the previous year. The bank loomed like a shadow, threatening foreclosure if the next season didn't turn. One evening, poring over the ranch's ledger by the soft glow of lamplight, Elena noticed discrepancies. Numbers that didn't add up, expenses inflated, hints of a neighbor's sabotage from old land disputes. "Jack," she said, her voice steady as she traced the figures with her finger, "this isn't right. Look here, the feed costs are double what they should be. And these boundary markers, someone's moving them." Her time clerking in Boston's shipping offices had honed her eye for details, a skill she never thought would serve her here. Jack rubbed his jaw, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You're right. Old man Whitaker's been gunning for this land since my pa's day." Together, they pored over maps spread across the table, yellowed with age, and records stacked in dusty boxes. Elena's fresh perspective spotted a legal loophole, a forgotten water rights clause that could prove Whitaker's encroachments invalid. It was an unexpected alliance, born of mutual respect, turning strangers into partners in a fight for their home. They rode to town the next day, Tommy in tow, to consult the lawyer. The boy beamed with pride. "Miss Elena's smart, Pa. She's like a detective in my stories." The profound turn came during the annual town fair in Willow Creek, a bustling event of rodeos, livestock auctions, and pie contests that drew folks from miles around. The air buzzed with laughter, the scent of fried dough and barbecue mingling with horse sweat. Elena entered her first apple pie, the crust golden and flaky from Jack's mother's recipe she'd adapted with cinnamon from her heritage. Nervous but determined, she set it on the judging table, Tommy cheering her on with fists pumped high. "Yours is the best, Miss Elena. It's got magic in it." But whispers followed her through the crowd. Outsider, foreigner, mail-order misfit. Some folks nodded politely, others sneered. The widow Clara Whitaker, old man Whitaker's daughter-in-law, a sharp-tongued woman with a grudge, cornered her at the booth. "That pie looks stolen from my grandma's book," Clara accused loudly, drawing eyes. "Send her back where she came from. We don't need her kind stirring trouble." Elena's cheeks burned with humiliation, her hands twisting in her apron. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but words failed. Then Jack stepped forward, his presence commanding, voice booming over the murmurs. "Elena ain't going nowhere. She's family, and that pie's as honest as the day is long." But it was Tommy who stole the show, clambering onto a hay bale, his voice piping clear. "She's my new mama, and she's the best because she saved me from the creek and sings to me and makes Pa smile again." The crowd fell silent, the boy's unfiltered truth hanging like a banner. Then, slowly, applause erupted, starting with a few claps and swelling like a wave. Even Clara backed down, muttering excuses. In that moment, Elena realized the power of chosen bonds, how kindness could bridge divides wider than oceans or prejudices, turning judgment into acceptance. As autumn painted the leaves in fiery golds and reds, tension built toward the emotional climax. A fever swept the valley like a silent thief, reminiscent of the one that had taken Sarah. It started with chills in the air, then struck the weak, elderly neighbors, young children. Tommy fell ill one crisp morning, his small body burning hot, skin flushed, delirious with dreams of his mother calling him. "Mama, where are you?" he mumbled, tossing in his bed. Jack paced like a caged animal, his face etched with lines of helpless fear, memories of loss resurfacing like ghosts. "Not again," he growled, fetching water from the well, his hands shaking. Elena, drawing on the painful memories of her family's ordeal in Boston, the endless nights of broth and prayers, refused to yield to despair. She brewed herbal teas from wild roots and willow bark she'd learned about from a local indigenous woman during market days, remedies that eased the fire in Tommy's veins. She sat vigil through endless nights, sponging his brow with cool cloths, whispering stories of brave knights from Spanish folklore and faraway lands where heroes always triumphed. Jack watched her from the doorway, his stoicism cracking like dry earth under rain. "I can't lose him too," he confessed in the dim light of midnight, sinking into a chair, head in hands. "Nor can I," she replied, her voice an anchor in the storm, her hand finding his across the table. In a moment of raw vulnerability, he shared his deepest regret. Not being enough for Sarah, burying his grief in endless work, fearing to love again lest it shatter him. Elena's compassion flowed like a healing river. "You're more than enough, Jack. You've built a life here, given Tommy a world of wonder. And together, we're stronger. Let me share the burden." Her selflessness shone brightest when the doctor, delayed by washed-out roads from the lingering storms, finally arrived. Too late for some, but Tommy's fever had already begun to break under her care. The boy stirred, his eyes clear and bright for the first time in days. "Miss Elena, you stayed," he whispered, reaching for her hand. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged him close. "Always mi niño." Dawn broke on that pivotal day, the sun rising like a promise over the horizon. Tommy's recovery was swift, his laughter returning like birdsong. Jack took Elena's hand outside the cabin, the crisp air alive with the scent of pine and possibility. They stood by the fence, watching the cattle graze peacefully. "You can send me back," she echoed her earlier words, half joking through lingering tears, testing the waters of their shared future. He pulled her close, his arms strong yet tender, his voice a rumble of certainty that vibrated through her. "My son already chose you, and so have I. You've brought light back to this place, Elena, with your kindness, your strength. We're a family now, if you'll have us." Their embrace sealed a transformative act, not just of romantic love, but of profound generosity in opening scarred hearts to healing. Jack proposed properly that evening, with a simple ring he'd saved from his mother's belongings, and Elena accepted, her yes a vow to the life they'd built together. In the years that followed, the Harlan Ranch flourished like never before, the debts cleared through savvy negotiations and bountiful harvests. Elena became not just a wife and stepmother, but a beacon in the community, teaching English to immigrant families arriving on the rails, sharing her knowledge of herbs and figures to help others thrive. Tommy grew tall and kind, carrying the legacy of compassion into his own adventures, eventually becoming a rancher himself with a family of his own. The story of the mail-order bride who stayed spread like wildfire across saloons and sewing circles, inspiring weary souls to see beyond surfaces, to embrace the unexpected gifts of humanity. It reminds us all, in this vast tapestry of life, from the bustling cities of the East to the rugged frontiers of the West, that kindness isn't a weakness, but the forge that shapes unbreakable bonds. Selflessness turns strangers into saviors. And the power of choosing one another, flaws and all, lights the path to hope. For in the prairies of our hearts, it's the acts of generosity that plant the seeds of enduring love, blooming eternal against the winds of time.